Dumela, Saubona, Sakpase, Namaste, Abshin, Dubra Ota, Assalamu alaikum, Hotep, Buenas noches, bonsoir, good evening. Welcome everyone to season 5, episode 3 of the Doriel Larrier Show. And in this particular series, because you know there are 4, tonight's series is going to focus on politician and the people. This episode is going to focus on a term that we started to hear called BrooklynVested. This is going to be our own personal audience with Khari Edwards. So in this conversation, you may have seen him around town. You may have heard his tagline, BrooklynVested. Our conversation tonight is going to be because we are approaching a very pivotal local election. And so in our conversation, we're going to talk with this dynamic leader who has deep roots in the borough and a bold vision for its future. Please welcome to our digital couch here, Brother Khari Edwards.
Thank
Welcome.
you for having me. Thank you for having me. That was an amazing opening too. I got all those different languages and greetings. That was wow.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I worked on it. There's an intention, and some people will understand it, and some people will figure it out as we go along. Welcome, 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 welcome to the show. I'm so glad that you said yes.
Thank you. This is a long time coming.
A long time coming, a long time coming. So I wanted to have people hear a little bit about, of course, you, but we're coming up again to a very, very, focused, intense moment in our, not just our weeks and our months, but of course in our society. And I wanted to make sure that people who say that they are for the people, say that they are particularly from Brooklyn, because I am Brooklyn all day, every day, would actually say yes to having a conversation with the people. And you definitely said yes. So I just want to give one more little moment because I love this statement. You have said that you're Brooklyn vested. You demonstrate that you mean it. Your commitment to Brooklyn, more than a slogan, the lifelong mission. We're definitely going to hear about that. Whether it's from healthcare to education to economic equity and public safety, you have demonstrated you've been rolling up your sleeves for decades and building partnerships and programs that put the community first. So, Brother Khari Edwards, the floor is yours. Please tell us who you are in this great race, why you've chosen to do this work, and what has brought you to this moment in terms of the public service that you've already done.
Well, again, thank you for having me. I am going to try to steal some of your greetings because that was dope. I love that.
That's fine.
My name is Khari Edwards. I am a father of 3 amazing children. My son just graduated Brandeis University, so one tuition down. I'm a husband of 7 years. My wife, Jamila Edwards. I'm a child of immigrants. My mom was from Trinidad. My dad is from Guyana. I've lived in this great borough half a century plus one. And so I let folks do the math. 27 years of that has really been dedicated to public service, working in not for profit, healthcare, and government service. My inspiration of service started out as a child. I'm a type 1 diabetic. I got diabetes. I was diagnosed with diabetes, what they called it sugar, in 1979. And what ended up happening, I was in a coma for about 3 months. And my mom and my dad thought that I was a goner because my sugars are through the roof. My body just shut down. And when I opened my eyes, I remembered someone saying, I always credit to my mom, but I remember someone saying that you got a second chance, pay it forward. And so every step of the way, I've been blessed to pay my second chance forward, but started out in politics because my mom, at my mom's insistence, she was like, "You're doing all these community things, I need you to like work in politics." And I was like, "I don't want to work in government. I want to be a young man and enjoy my life." And so my first job was with Assemblyman Nick Perry, who is, now Ambassador Nick Perry, retired Ambassador Nick Perry. And the first day on my job changed my life forever. I tell this story all the time. Like assemblyman had a very particular way of answering the phones. And he said, you know what? If you don't have a script, you can't answer the phones. But of course, the day that I started, the phones were ringing off the hook. And I answered the phone. And on the other side was Miss Graham, who lived in Clarendon Road. And she kind of had turned off her lights when she'd gotten home. And she was screaming and yelling and asking to speak to the assemblyman. And I panicked and I took her number and I told her I'd call her right back. And I called Con Ed and I said to Con Ed, this is wrong. I work for Assemblyman Nick Perry. This is wrong. And we need to help this woman get her lights back on. And they came back on and they told me, tell the assemblyman thank you for his service. We are going to turn the lights back on. And for me, that became my moment of, wow, government can do great things for people.
There we go. Sorry about that.
Yep.
So it took your first day on the job and Miss Graham to let you know, this is my take, that it took someone to sit in someone's office versus the person themselves to move the needle.
Yeah. Yes.
So what does that say to you about the haves and the have mores, or the have different? What do we need to do to teach, to educate, inform our residents, our community members, how to get their voice heard?
Yeah, I think, again, I've been blessed to work with some great leaders, some great mentors in the space. I think really that we have to have our voice. We have to speak up. I think in that moment she knew to call the assemblyman's office, whereas she probably felt she wasn't going to get, as a everyday citizen, help from Con Ed. And she may have called Con Ed. But I realized that, what they say, a closed mouth doesn't get fed. And sometimes, when folks, when they pick up that phone, someone needs to answer it for them. And I think that has been the understanding that I have about public service, about answering the call when folks need it the most.
Given that situation, in your potential role of being Brooklyn Borough President, what type of educational opportunities might you give, or might you offer, or might you have some people in your staff, or people who are part of other community organizations do to support residents to have that voice? Because just like you said, Brother Nick Perry saying, if you don't have a script, like, I'm going to focus on the script. Right. So what's the script? What is the script that people could use?
Well, the script for me, as the, I'll put it in the universe as the next borough president, is for folks to use their innate ability to serve. I don't want to, and my hopefulness is to hire people who have the same moral standards and the same desire to when they pick up the phone, they know that they're in a service industry. That they know that elected officials' offices are, some represent, some write policies, some solve problems. And the borough president's office for me is a place that solves problems. And so we want to be obsessed with constituent services, because constituent services do lead to building better communities for me. I think, and we spoke about it, I just love to hear people. And by you hearing people, whether it's a moment on the train where a young man is feeling aggressive, or just someone who wants to cry on your shoulder, it's something that when you give people space to talk and to vent, then you give them healing. And that healing, should come into the form of support. But, we won't be able to solve everyone's issues. But if we hear them and if they feel heard, then I think that the healing begins that way.
And so let's shift into how the BrooklynVested has shown up over let's say, the last 15 years or so. So talk about some of the experiences that you've had that give you, I'll say, a toe in the water for
Yes.
you, or for the opportunity that you're going to be jumping into in as the votes may go, in the next few weeks and months. Like what what has gotten you to this point that says, if I can do this, I could do that.
Yeah, so it was very interesting that you said 15 years. So if I started 15 years, I was working for the New York State Senate at the time that Andrew Cuomo was doing the second Burger Commission, which would have started to close hospitals in Brooklyn specifically. And I was under the leadership of Senator Sampson, who trusted in me to create this think tank of healthcare professionals. And the healthcare professionals, we all sat at Borough Hall, interestingly enough, thanks to Marty Markowitz allowing us to use the building. And we created a plan to protect hospitals from closing, because at that point, Caledonia closed and St. Mary's closed, and healthcare specifically for Black communities, and I'd say Black and brown, but mostly Black at the time, became a place where we were going to start to lose services. And at that point, downstate was in trouble like it is now. And so we start to see this rehashing of it. And he gave me that entree to be the senator and to be in a place where I ran the work groups. I followed up with the white paper. And then when he was transitioning from his position, I got hired to work at Brookdale Hospital. And the year before I got to Brookdale Hospital, well, I'll back up. Everybody knows Brookdale Hospital as being the place people go to die, right? New York 1 or News 12, the victim goes, doesn't make it. And so when I got to Brookdale Hospital a year before, there was 182 penetrating traumas, which means almost every other day someone got shot within the central East Brooklyn area. And my job was to show the world that healthcare is a saving mechanism and hospitals aren't just there for folks to die. And it gave me another leadership role under Mark Toney, who was at the time a temporary CEO. And again, having these mentors, having these people who trusted in me, was able to give me that space. And then I spent 8 to 9 years at Brookdale Hospital, and I started a gun violence program and opened up the schools to come in, and we did Brookdale at Your Door, and we did all of these amazing community engagement pieces, our health fairs, and you name it, we did it. And then COVID happened, and COVID showed me that we weren't all right as a community. We weren't all right in terms of as a resourced community. We weren't getting PPEs, much like a lot of the other safety net hospitals weren't. And I took a calculated but risky risk of my career, and I allowed CNN to come into the hospital. And by allowing CNN to come into the hospital, we were able to show the world we weren't okay. And I almost lost my job, but the governor, the mayor, the folks that needed to get us PPE, we got PPE from as far as Australia. And then downstate did it, and some other hospitals did it. And now all of a sudden, COVID was not just something you saw on CNN, but you saw it everywhere as the community. And so that was what propelled me to desire to run for elected office, to show that engaging leadership, I called it. Because I'm a policy guy. I'm pretty good at that, right? But I'm not as good as a Kevin Parker or Brian Cunningham. Like, those are the policy guys. I'm the, let me get my hands dirty, let me show up. My wife calls it air traffic control.
It's all necessary work.
Yes.
All of those brothers that you mentioned, they're all doing their part.
Yes.
You're doing your part. Everybody is needed, right? The legislative, the executive, the judicial, we're all doing our part. The part that you play, as you said, I like that, air traffic controller.
Air traffic control.
Okay. All right. All right. So we talked about some public health issues. You've definitely shown up in, let's say you spoke about the Brookdale and in that community. And so let's sort of shift to how you're showing up in other communities. I did, see some presence in some other local neighborhoods
Yes.
that have a variety of, our other cousins. And
Yeah.
so talk about some of how other communities are being heard, because you would be the borough president for all of Brooklyn.
Brooklyn.
And
Yeah.
as we were chatting or looking up sort of the current um, percentages or the current ranking, that Brooklyn may have been the fourth largest city, but maybe it's now the third largest city in the
Yes.
United States. So how would you be the borough president for all of Brooklyn? Who else have you stood up for?
Well, so that again was the beginning of, not the beginning, the me learning at Brookdale. So during COVID, Brookdale represented 1.3 million people in their catchment area. And in that, the 1.3 million people, you had the Bangladeshi Muslim community in, East New York going into Queens. You had a very high Asian community starting to come as far as Coney Island. And what COVID did for me at that point was that we started to feed community. We started to have churches pull up because we had the links, and we had Fresh Direct, and they were bringing all of this food as part of our CNN world. And so what my team and I decided to do is, we had so much food, right? Let's start reaching out. And so we started reaching out to, like I said, the local churches, and then it became the mosques, and then it became the food pantries in East New York. Then it became a place for our Asian brothers and sisters who were living in some of the most deplorable conditions based off of language barriers. And so now we were visiting their homes, and taking Pampers, and being part of their community in that way. And I was the one delivering the food, and I was the one showing up. And then I live in Crown Heights, and I live in a Hasidic Jewish community that has a long, rich history. But these are my neighbors, right? When you say cousins, like, they're literally my cousins. I know 90% of the kids by name. Like, they play with my dog outside, and it's like, it's family. And so understanding just the complexities of community and diversity of community, I feel that I'm well suited to be that person for everyone.
Okay. All right. And when you show up for them, the intent is that they are showing up for you, and that they are supporting you in the efforts of showing up for them.
Yeah. But when I showed up for them, it was never a thought in my mind. It was more about, again, that second chance in life, paying it forward, doing for folks. And actually, that's been a very difficult place for me, because you're running for office now. So the hope is to go into those communities and kind of remind them, hey, you were there. But it's such a heartfelt thing that I'm running, but it's such a difficult thing to go and say, hey, I'm running. Do you remember when I was here? Or can you vote for me? And so that's been the my wife said that there needs to be a little bit of narcissism in every elected official. She used a different word, but I'll use narcissism. And so it's now trying to find that space of, I need you now, and it's still humbling. It's still difficult.
So let's shift into, there's the public space where the adults are concerned, and then there is the young people that we are raising up, who are will be the next voting group, right? The voting bank of people who will be making sure that the voices that they think are supposed to be representing them are in the offices. And so you shared on some of your marketing and some of your canvassing that you are concerned about education, and how education looks, and who is being serviced, and what funds are being directed to their needs. So talk for a moment about how your plans on making sure you're hearing the needs of parents, pedagogues, and the pupils. I like that. You could use that. And how the needs will then get transferred into dollars that then go in order to improve those schools?
Yeah. So, my desire and my commitment, I'm going to say my commitment now, is to visit every elementary and middle school within my first year. Originally, I said my first 100 days, and then my team was like, "You're crazy." And I was like, first year. Because I've been doing the work now, I've been visiting schools specifically in District 23, because that's, Brownsville. But, the program that a principal and I came up with is this is what we do for schools in schools. And the way to be able to do things for schools in schools are to visit the schools, and not just the buildings, but the community, the PTAs, sit in classrooms, talk to the administrators, find out what is going on and what do you need. And so one of the things, I'm gonna throw a little shade on my opponent, but one of the things that he has not done is gone into community schools in impacted communities, and meaning the under-resourced communities, the Brownsvilles, the Coney Islands, the Sheepshead Bay. And so you can't really equitably give, and borough presidents get $45 million a year in capital budgets. So I'm sure we'll talk about that a little later. But what does that mean? When you have fair student funding, that is a set money that either comes from the government or federal government down to the states, let's just say it's $100,000. Within that $100,000, you have teacher salaries, you have capital budgets, you have just operational things, and then you have the other things that children come to school without book bags or need pencils. And so if you take that capital money and you kind of offset it, then there's more money and there's fair student funding to now help with the things that our kids are lacking. And those are some of the things that, I presented to the UFT in terms of my plan. And then I show up in the schools to do, help them with their student government, right? I love that stuff. So, I was in PS 155, PSIS 155, and the principal's like, "Are you acting like you running for student government?" I'm helping them with the posters because, you and I spoke about this earlier, civics is lost. And so I want students to feel that feeling I had of service, to know that being in an elected office is exciting. You get to represent. So that's what we do for schools in schools.
Okay, I want to bring up some comments. So we have some of the fans. Thank you, Brother Walter Gist, for showing up. Thank you, Sister Pat. Thank you for your life tour into politics. I appreciate that. And then I just had to, my eyes dart because I'm doing some research behind the scenes, right? And so there are 1,722 public schools in Brooklyn. So yeah, the first 100 days.
Yeah, what's gonna happen?
No, no. But okay, first year we can handle that. We might be able to handle that. And so actually, you said something that sort of like piqued my ear a little bit. So you said that you definitely want to visit the schools, but these are the public schools.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm not forgetting the charters.
Okay, but then also there are independent.
Yep,
and then there are parochial. I've worked and served at the brunt of them during my life in my other world.
I mean, I will take the beating now and say that the lion priority will be the public schools, just based off of the fact that a lot of them, the funding gets caught up, obviously, because they're public schools, and then I'll move to some of the other schools. But I do think that a lot of the attack on public schools is because folks don't realize that, the heat is on in the summer, and that the air conditioning's on in the winter, and that because enrollment has been lost, we tend to move education in certain places. So I am gonna visit every elementary and middle school. So now it will be up to 1,700, because I think your 1,700 had some high schools in there. I'll get to them the second year. But yes, I have a lot of good friends who are principals at charter schools and parochial schools, and told me I better show up for them. And so I will show up for them as well. But my school tour will be real. Or maybe get a little bus too and ride around. That'll be fun.
Okay. All right. With BrooklynVested.
Yes, BrooklynVested.
Excellent. And thank you definitely, of course, to making the, oh, here we go. So here's my other fan. The public schools are under attack. Yes, this is a great first step. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Let's hop into, so it's still a little bit on education, but it's shifting to the equity part and how you plan to serve the neighborhoods equally and equitably. Now let's just pause for the cause, because equity is a big E word, right? You know, your three focus words are equity, inclusion, and engagement.
Yes.
What is the ranking system? What is the ranking system on who you will visit first and why? So you mentioned that you've spent some time in District 23, and I've served. Let me say that word, served, in District 23 in the first part of my career, and so. What ranks as first? Like, who are you going to see first and why?
So you look at just the area median income, the socioeconomic, social determinants of health in those areas, because some of them go hand in hand, right? So when you have high poverty, high negative health outcomes, poor resource communities, then you tend to see that the education in those, and not the education is being taught, but the infrastructure tends to be much like the community, right? So when I talk about places, the 10 safety net hospitals in Brooklyn, you know, Brookdale being one, you know, Interfaith, Coney Island, even though they're getting a nice new facade, the reality of it is those high Medicaid communities, they all move into one place. So my target will be those impacted communities first, to start in a District 23, a District 21, because when you look at the overall funding program from DOE or from the state over the course of time, you could see where the monies don't get fully allocated. And then I'll go to District 32 and District 15, because that's where the equality of visiting is, but the equity of the needs of funding is different there.
And I'm glad that you said that, because there is, with different communities having new members and new incomes in those communities, entering and shifting the the median income, those zip codes, those neighborhoods that once were on a particular part of the socioeconomic status are shifting within, which is why I said, who will you go to first? And so I'm actually just going to pop up this question or this statement. So this person says, thank you, Assistant Naz. We also need after school programs. And so, of course, is that under your jurisdiction?
Yes. So the actual after school programs are something that I will be able to advocate for. The funding stream is not necessarily under because, again, Borough President gets a lot of capital money. But so Nas, to your point, though, there was a moment when touring Coney Island, Coney Island used to have a high gang, concentration, a lot of violence. And the gentleman who was taking me around, Anthony Suber, told me, he's like, hey, the violence is lessened here over a period of time. So I'm like, well, why? He's like, you see all of these buildings? They started hiring the kids, giving them something to do. And so I stopped, and it was like a light bulb went in my head. Every borough president has had a economic development not-for-profit attached to the office, right? Because a borough president only gets somewhere around sub $2 million for actual operational money to give to like not-for-profits, et cetera, et cetera. Marty's was Best of Brooklyn. Eric's was One Brooklyn. I believe Antonio was Brooklyn for All, but he stopped it. Mine's going to be BrooklynVested, right? And so within that, we're going to raise money to then pay for public schools, because I could do it public schools. It's get a little cheaper. to stay open late. So the principal over at Meyer Levine was like, she wants her building open for 20 hours. How is she going to be able to do that? So the idea that we have for schools that are not community schools are to build this fund up to pay for them to be open after hours, have not-for-profits come in, whether it's unions, whether it's dance, whether it's coding, have not-for-profits come in, because a lot of the times they spend their money on space or they don't have access to space. So again, it's the same thing with the fair student housing, reducing their operational costs by giving them a capital infusion to come into these schools, use these classrooms, these gymnasiums, bring the kids from the community in, because the more kids that come in, their numbers go up. And now we'll see a level of violence or a lack of things for the kids to do come down, because we're giving them something to do. And so again, starting in the impacted communities, starting out the first 30, 40, 50 schools, and saying, if you're not a community school, we're going to come put this funding in and get all these local groups to come in and bring our kids off the street. It's again, it's not pie in the sky. I obviously have to get in to make these things work, but it's doable. And we've studied the numbers, the metrics, and we're ready.
So then you've actually answered this part of this question. So for the amount of funding you're given, how will you prioritize the schools? It's kind of truncated, but the next part is prioritize the schools and their needs. So you've actually just answered that question, and I appreciate the fans who are coming out and asking those questions. Good. Is there anything else you want to share, or shall we go to the next part?
We can go to the next part.
Okay. Which again is actually connected. So the next part has to do with the vision for youth programs. And I think one of the schools that I'm familiar with is, and that's because I spent some time in Bedford-Stuyvesant, is the Beacon School. 35 done on one side, Stuyvesant on the other. And they had, like an extended day, extended evening, or like open for many hours. I don't know if it was 20 hours, but that's ambitious. I think that's amazing. I mean, it's amazing. So here we go. Here's another comment. So it was a model of a successful after-school program called the Jackie Robinson Program. School stayed open later, and students of all ages had support. So then maybe that could be used as an example of it being done well.
Yes.
Okay. So now we're going to shift into, so you started talking about your vision for youth and, let's say, programming in high-need areas. Let's shift over into when they leave those programs. Where are they going home? How are we going to look at the housing justice and injustice and, burgeoning vertical communities, as someone in my community says, that, you could have had a block that had, let's say, 75 residents. And now with these vertical communities, that 75 resident block could literally, in a matter of a year and a half, increase to 575 units. I'm speaking of, I'm in the Flatbush area, and so I'm speaking of how Sears parking lot, if anybody knows Brooklyn and anybody knows the Flatbush community, I mean, I can look, I don't even know the amount of units, but that entire parking lot is a community. In my mind, it looks like Starrett City. In my mind, it looks like Vanderveer. In my mind, it looks like Farragut.
In my mind too.
Who's living there? Who got how many units are for the people who live in the area? How does your role as borough president impact decisions like that are being made? Who's going to get those spaces? What we could do about it as community, as neighborhood folk?
Yes. So one of the other roles that the borough president has is they not only appoint folks to the community board, but they have say in the ULURP process, which is the universal land review process, where if you want to build using land in the community, there's an application that goes in. The borough president office looks at your application, approves your application, goes into conjunction with the community board, then it goes to the public planning commission, who then votes. We really did a disservice to our real AMI, our community AMI, average median income, because when you start to see how these buildings are built, People talk about construction costs and all these other things. So let's say it takes $1 million to build a building, and then you all of a sudden get tax abatements. So cost you $1 million, but you're getting the tax abatement, so it's almost free. But then you're going to charge somebody $3,000-4,000 rent to make up for the money that you basically never used. I tell folks a lot of times I am not against tying myself to a new construction if it doesn't have a community AMI. So the AMIs that we are living with in New York City are tied to Westchester as well as Long Island. So it raises what the average salary in Brooklyn is about $55,000 to $56,000 a year. But the average AMI and where they're building our HPD homes and stuff are starting at almost 75, 80,000. So who does that exclude? Your 1199 workers, your DC 37 workers, your 32 BJ workers, folks who get up every day, go to work, want to pay their bills, may have a couple children, and now have to fight not only these buildings going up, but also the tax burden that these buildings bring on the residents. So as borough president, the reality for it is that anything coming up new, we have a right to try to fight it. I don't believe in this 80-20 split where you give 80 market and 20%, low income, just so that you can offset and give people houses, and then they're fighting for the lottery because, the lottery is not going to bring everybody in. We know how lotteries work. If not, we'd all be rich, right? And so the reality of when you start looking at these buildings, they're not building for us, and no one's really advocating about that. So from a standpoint of being a borough president, I have the advocacy power. I could also introduce legislation in conjunction with a city council member, but then I also have the ability to create a little bit of havoc as it pertains to these ULURP processes. And that's been the big thing that we need to push.
900 residential units. 900. That is a community. That is a community. Where are the schools? I don't necessarily need you to answer that question, but it's always the question. Who are these buildings being built for? Where are the schools? The schools that are in the area in the next, I believe, 2 to 3 years, the Department of Education is reducing the seats, or the seats. When I say seats, meaning the class sizes,
Right.
from let's say it's about 32 or so, and the goal is to get it to about 22, and that's above kindergarten.
Yeah.
With all of these high rises,
where are they going?
Where are the schools? Are we building? Are we constructing schools within the buildings? Like there's a building on Linden or Lennox Road.
There's Ascend. Yeah,
Ascend.
And it's a kindergarten, it's an elementary charter school, so it's not even the middle school. The middle school is closer to Newark that they're attached to. So to your point, I have 3 children. The expectation is I'm not going to have any more children at this point. But these new families that come in, I think they build with the expectation that it's going to just be a recycled folks, that folks are maybe not going to stop in. Because look how out of those 900 units, I'm sure some of them only 600 square feet. So you're barely enough to have a kitchen and a bathroom. But they're building with a sense of ownership and greed. No one's talking about that, because once they own the land, they own the land, and that's where people not realizing that it's not the apartment building, it's the fact that they own the land. And then when they decide they want to do something else with the land, it belongs to them. And so that's the key that no one's talking about, because in 20, 30 years, if you decide you want to move everyone out, or who's going to tell you no? Because you own that land on the ground. Because remember, it's not city land. Someone bought it, but no one sat there to do a community benefits agreement. They'll give you a certain amount of affordable units, but still they're building.
these decisions were not just made, 2, 3 years ago. They were made 10, 15 years ago because they projected, how the building on the land, which it's still a historical landmark, right? I believe is going through some, processes to maintain its landmark status, but those decisions weren't made, 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
They projected what the income was going to be. They projected that the sales were going down because of, like the e-stores and, the online purchasing, shopping. People are not going in. Oh, okay. Hey, this community could this community really need that much housing? But who is it for? Just all those things. So again, as a Brooklyn resident, someone who is Brooklyn diehard, these are things that we're concerned about, and we're hoping that whoever is going to hold that title is really going to not just hear us, but also say, hey, here are the people, here are the papers that need to be pushed, here are the buttons that need to be pushed, here are the microphones and megaphones that need to be picked up in order to say this is what needs to happen. But also, so now let's talk about the economy of Brooklyn. Thank you so much for, I'll say it this way, bringing Brooklyn back. And what I say about that is I'm a child of this Brooklyn community where I attended some of the cultural events. How you had a challenge on one of your socials of who, and you were singing, "Who are the people in your neighborhood?" Thank you for trying to sing the song. I really, really, really appreciate that. Because we're in the same age range. Like going back to Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. I get it. I totally get it. And the challenge was like, name, what is it, 10 people on your block. And you said
Yes.
first name, last initial, and like the door number and what have you. And I literally thought, wait a minute. Because in my mind, over the last like 5 to 6 years, we have become, as a result of, the global shutdown, rather insular and dependent upon ourselves. And so unless you live in a community like, and I lived in Bedford-Stuyvesant, shout out to Bed-Stuy, loved you, I miss you all. And I could possibly name some of the people on my block, but I didn't have that, let's say 20 or 30-year history where the same people being on the block were the people that I knew and grew up with, or that my mother and father knew and, sat on the stoop, whatever. I live in Flatbush. We live in apartment buildings. Yeah. Because of how we reside, unless you were there for, again, 20, 30 years, people really lived within their spaces. Mm-hmm. So to say, like, could you name 10 people? I was almost shocked. Like, could I name 3?
Yeah.
Right? So, but here's the question. I already know the answer to this. How have you attempted to get people out of their houses into spaces so that they know who their neighbor is, or that, oh, you do live across the street from me, you do live upstairs or outside, next door, what have you? What have you done in order to bring Brooklyn back?
Well, the first fun part was the challenge, because some people took that very seriously and was offended, not at me, but that they didn't know. I've had some judges call me like, I've lived on my block for 25 years and I don't know 3 or 4 people. And so they made it their business. So the challenge was to create that. Prior to me running, I started a podcast. I think I did a couple episodes. Once I win, I'll get back to it. But it's called Lend Me Some Sugar, I Am Your Neighbor. Because
excuse me, wait. I'm going to have to say this just for the record. But if you're having grits, it needs to be salt. Now
right.
Go ahead.
That's maybe some butter.
Who are watching, who I know. If we're talking grits, it has to be salt. Don't play with me. Okay.
I love that. But actually, the logo does look like salt, so we couldn't tell the difference. But it came into the concept of when I wanted to run, how we looked at neighborhoods, how we looked at the people who are next to us. Like I said, living in Crown Heights. It was a Black community for, when I was a kid up until maybe 1980, 85. And then our Jewish brothers and sisters started to come in because folks were selling their homes or whatever, however you want to look at it. And so the community started to change. And then what was the need of it? I'm a Shabbos Gentile, right? So on Fridays when my neighbors can't touch any electronics and stuff, I go by and turn off their stove, turn on the stove. So I built rapport with community because there was a community need. But to the point of what you're saying, when we were growing up, shout out to Marty Markowitz, who put us in rooms that we would be able to sit one next to one another and enjoy, have joy, right? So whether it was the concerts, whether it was the block parties, we don't do that as a community anymore. And I think to your point, it was because of COVID. But now that we're outside, there's no better place to be in the summertime than Brooklyn and New York City. So last couple times around, I'm like, I want to create that again. I want to bring back Seaside. I want to bring back Wingate. I want to bring communities back. And so a friend of mine, awesome Brooklyn, Miles, Miles and Vanessa, he was like, he wants to do community block parties when I win. And like, we have acts and and I'm like, that's great. I said, but let's start big, right? Let's bring Wingate back first. Let's start to create the movement. And so for one of my fundraisers, I did Brooklyn Culture Fest. And it was really just about, I was trying to raise money for the campaign, but it was really bringing back that Wingate style thing. Ms. Jones hosted it. We had Renee from John A. We had Coffee Brown. We had Little C. So and then we went to Fabulous, right? And so people came out and had a good time. And it cost very little to have these entertainers come out to entertain people. And now I'm thinking, I don't even have a city budget yet. I don't even have a borough president budget to now do this on the grander scale. And so obviously you're going to need police and staging, but we could do this for a community because I remember looking forward to that money. I met my wife at Wingate. She worked for borough president. I spoke on behalf of the governor at a Barris concert. I see her walking by, jump off stage and try to talk to her. And the rest is history. And so that's the place that, I'm looking to bring people back because that will bring people together.
Wingate brings a couple of communities together. My thinking is that other communities who you have begun to gather together to listen to, that they may want their version of that. And I speak from a person who lives in a community where there are literally three huge different geographically separated residents, all converging in this all converging in this Y. And so again, because I say that they are rather insular, I'm interested in knowing, would they be interested in a Wingate or interested in something that is connected to their own, community, that they vibe together? And not everybody has to be in the same concert, right? But everyone needs to have their own opportunity to celebrate and to share with other communities, whoever feels like they want to walk down the block.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of the diversity of Brooklyn. And so 2 doors down from me is probably one of the world's most famous Jewish singers. And his posters are all over the block. And one day I saw him, I said, I gotta come hear you one day. He was like, come, it's right up the block. And so now, I got invited. I went, it was cool. I didn't fully understand, but to your point, when we do things for the communities, we become a part of them. So Asian, Muslim, Jewish, Italian. I told the lady the other day, I was in Brooklyn Heights, that one of the concerts I want to bring back is Hall & Oates. I love Hall & Oates. I want them to come back together.
I grew up with Hall & Oates.
Yes, I want them to come back for me as borough president and do it in a community that's going to love Hall & Oates.
Okay. All right. So let's touch on one last topic. We've actually probably chatted longer than we thought we were going to chat. How about that?
Well, you are a great host, and so thank you, because I was nervous that I wouldn't have anything to say.
I think not, but thank you for the compliment. So we talked about youth, we've talked about like equity, public health. Let's wrap up with small business and economic support, economic development. As a result of the global shutdown, many small businesses, including houses of worship, have gone through a humongous shift in their local support, in their own economic development. Uh, Travesties, right? Some businesses, including houses of worship, have had to shift to the Zoom life, right? The spirit is through the wires.
Yes.
I don't know how that sounds, but I said it anyway. But the shift of how do we make business online? How do we grow? Um, whether it be MWBE, whether it just be the SBA, the Small Business Administration, whether it be like the new coffee shop that's opening, or like the pop shop. And I say pop shop because I think you were at some local place on Ocean Avenue, which I am going to have to check out.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
right.
Shout out to PJ's. Oh, the ice cream is great.
There we go. I'll find them on Ocean Avenue. If for those of you who are wondering, just go see Brother Khari on, I think it was like TikTok or Instagram, and he was visiting, some local shops. But people are now outside, but there are so many businesses that were hurt. How can the borough president's office and or your team, or you reaching across many aisles, how can you support the shift from, right, the mom and pop shops who used to be on the corners, and now they're actually, it's maybe the children of the mom and pop shops, but these new entrepreneurs who are trying to, let's say, get a bookstore open, or have a little tea shop, or have a clothing store, or whatever it is that they're trying to do. How are you going to make space for them? What can the office do to make space to support the development, the growth, the starting? What can happen? Because we run on small businesses, especially if we are, not shopping at certain places.
Yeah, I'm with you. So there's a couple of things. One, again, going back to, probably one of the greatest borough presidents ever, Marty Markowitz. We have to reestablish the things. It's kind of like bringing bell bottoms back, right? Go back to the old fashioned way of doing things. One, we have to reestablish a Brooklyn tourism, because so many people feel Brooklyn is this amazing place. My wife and I were in Thailand for our honeymoon, and people wearing Brooklyn hats. So it's its own economic engine. So when they come, let's influence it by creating Brooklyn tourism. Let's get some buses and go through Bed-Stuy and Brownsville and up Nostrand Avenue, and let people look at it that way, because we have Little Caribbean and Little Haiti, and in Bay Ridge we have basically Little Chinatown. Let's create that. The other thing too is, what has happened to the incentives of small business? So we have Small Business Sunday, but not from a borough president standpoint.
Right.
So my desire is to bring back the Brooklyn Restaurant Week, Small Business Week, where stores give them discounts for coming in. And we do it right around payday. We do it right around, tax refund time, because it'll force people to want to see and understand. And then the last thing that I could talk about is something called ETIs. I talk about this a lot, and I'm glad I'm able to say it on your show. Economically targeted investments are something that is a portfolio funded by the 5 pension plans that is a set aside for economically targeted communities, which are for housing, low-income housing, as well as small business support. And so small businesses can take a low interest loan from the city of New York to help build up their function. So the state of New York has done a great job with it. The city of New York has been behind. No comptroller has done it. And they talk about it, but no one's opened up this RFP that's been open for 40 plus years. So these are the things that now small businesses can tap into a fund to save themselves and then get into the 21st century, whether it's delivery, whether it's online, but it's something that no one's really talking about. And even though it's not from a borough president standpoint, I am a government official who understands how to find where the money is, and let's get that done.
Thank you very much for sharing about about Brooklyn tourism. So this is going to connect to a statement that I saw that you made when I was doing my research. That when you were working with the Make-A-Wish, right? Make-A-Wish Foundation as the Brooklyn Community Council president, right?
Yes.
And you said that you were trying to answer the wishes of some children. And I think you were going to, let's say, the Manhattan cousins, and some of them did not want to cross either the tunnel or the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And my first thought was, why are you going to Manhattan to ask? We got folk right up here in Brooklyn who'll be happy to join in. And so here's the bridge. Connecting to community organizations, which I know you have some associations with, and expanding that reach, coupled with, and this is a shout out to one of an organization that I know of who does, I think they call it a Brooklyn crawl during the Cyber Week after Christmas, and they're known for doing this Brooklyn crawl of supporting some local communities. And then also there's an elected official right in my community. So I'll shout out Farrah Lewis, who has taken what we know in the Flatbush area as the Hillel Place little path.
Yeah.
And created, I want to call it a cook-off. I know it's not called a cook-off, but anyway, she has all of these small restaurants that come and have like a food tasting, and then like a contest and so forth. And I know that does happen. I'm not all over Brooklyn, but I know that does happen in some other places. And I'm hoping that this economic development, drive of either supporting the small business or having Brooklyn crawls or having like the Brooklyn restaurant week. I don't necessarily need to go to Manhattan for restaurant week. Let me sit right here in Brooklyn, right?
Right.
That we can improve the expansion and the notoriety of people who have shops, as well as getting that tour bus to come through our communities.
Yes.
And stop off, because I know when I go travel, my tour guide says, and I've been to some places, some foreign countries on more than one occasion, and my same tour guide basically takes me to the same places that I've been at 5 or 6 years earlier. I can literally say, hey, oh, you still working here at the so-and-so shop? Are you still here working at the, great, good to see. And they'll recognize me like, weren't you here? Yes, I was. Here's my picture from being here 5 years ago. But let those tour buses come through and see whether it's Little Haiti or up on, let's say, Coney Island Avenue, the Pakistani community, or let's say into, as you said, not Borough Park. Where did you say it was like
Bay Ridge?
Bay Ridge, right? Bay Ridge. But when I think of Bay Ridge, I actually don't think of like a Chinatown. I think of like lots of Italian,
Yeah, on some part, but then if you go down to like I think it's just Fifth Avenue. It starts, and again they renamed so much. Yeah. Sunset Park too. Yeah.
Yes. And so if that is a part of the plan to, your version, BrooklynVested, me bring Brooklyn back, to have these communities economically cross-pollinate.
Right.
That's a stretch, because people will support their own communities, and that's fine. Somehow, some way, we have to work together because we all have to eat. And if there are people leaving Manhattan to come to Brooklyn to live, then they are also going to be spending their money in Brooklyn.
And to your point, the literal "that's how we eat" is because the one thing about cross-pollination starts with food.
Right.
And that's where it starts, in a place where People will go to Chinatown to eat. They'll go to Pakistani to eat, Pakistani food. Like that, we will, once we create this place that you can do that. So as a diabetic, I go all the way to kind of Bay Ridge Sunset Park to get bitter melon to help keep my blood sugar down. But I drive all the way out to 61st Street to get it because that's the only place I'm finding it.
Not wait. Not on Church Avenue?
No, I don't get it on not bitter melon. Bitter melon, the Chinese green grocers. That's what some good bitter melon. I haven't.
Hey, wait. Whoever's watching this, find Brother Khari some bitter melon in like the Flatbush community.
In Flatbush area, that
challenge. I'm gonna look for some places.
Yeah.
That's fine. Wherever you find it, that's fine. But yeah, so I definitely wanted to thank you so much for again saying yes, speaking to the local folks who we're some movers and some shakers here on this show and in this fan group, and we definitely wanted to hear from a person who we have seen in some streets, right, doing some shaking of hands, doing some, showing up at the places and spaces, visiting some churches.
I know.
Some people understand that as I'm doing that. And making sure that also our safety, right? Our safety. I know you are connected to a clergy council in.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. God Squad 67 Church Clergy Council.
That's right.
I sit on the advisory board, so I'm in trouble, but I'll be at church. I'm gonna make that phone call.
That's okay. We'll make sure it happens. So here's the last thing, and this is because it's coming up in a couple of weeks. After, of course, we're here for June 24th. Mm-hmm. June
14th is early voting, just in case.
So 6/14 and 6/24. 6/14. Yep. I will put that on my socials to make sure that you come out or you send it off or you walk across the street or walk down the block. But in the last point, and this is in terms of safety, because in my mind, this is what Brooklyn is about, and that's the National Night Out.
Yeah.
National Night Out, that's another opportunity that people can get together, that people can come out, that the people who are running the city make sure that people know that they are joined together, that they are reaching hands across the table. How do you reach your hands across the table with council members, Congress, senators, the other elected officials to make sure that this stays, as you say, BrooklynVested? What's your connection to them? And how do you chat with them to make sure that we get this job done?
So 27 years of being in this public service realm, I know 90% of them, right? And the 10% that I don't know, it's kind of like I always look at NBA players that have each other's numbers and don't know how we get them. And so I will make sure that I have the other elected officials' numbers that I don't have. And I tell folks the example is, my wife and I, we love each other. We argue sometimes, but it's always a great world of communication. And any great relationship, any lasting relationship, whether it's with your wife, your children, another elected official, is to be able to communicate respectfully, communicate your needs and talk. And so I'm excited for this journey, because in order to be a good borough president, you have to have the buy-in from state assembly members, state senators, city council members, Congress members, in order to continue to advocate for your home, because Brooklyn in its entirety is our home. And so they're just my cousins that I got to make sure they're my good cousins. And I'm looking forward to saying, hey, what do you need? How can I help out? How can I plug that hole of support that you need? How can my constituent service help your constituent service? Because I think that's really what it is. I have no beef in the streets. I have no beef. The only person I technically seem like I have beef with is the guy I'm running against. Other than that, I have no beef with anyone.
And since we all have to eat, here's your last question. Your last thing to think about, or let us know your thoughts on. So it is, we should also be thinking about sustainability and food security. There should be some support for urban backyard farming. What are your thoughts on this? And then the last statement of it is community gardens as well.
Yeah. So Naj, you walk right into one of my policy points. We have 250,000 people who live in Brooklyn that go to bed hungry at night, and only 152 verified food pantries. There are a lot of churches and folks that do it on their own. Where do we get the food? How do we get the food? Kingsborough Community College has one of the most beautiful farms in Brooklyn. Upstate, there are so many farms that have so much overages, but they don't have transportation. So one of the things that I'm going to do is to quadruple the amount of food pantries by supporting them, helping them get refrigeration, seeing how their infrastructure is going to be built up. Also, then purchasing vans to have food transferred from community gardens, especially from Kingsborough and upstate. Shout out to Campaign Against Hunger and Riseboro, how they do things. But I would love to see that idea about, backyard farming. It's just that we become such a concrete jungle, specifically in Flatbush. There's no green spaces, but there are green spaces in Carroll Gardens and Bed-Stuy, and so it's really allowed. I mean, they grow for themselves, but I do think that there's a way to help folks. A lot of hydroponic farms that kids are doing great stuff with, but we need to get it out to people. And that was something that we did at Brookdale, that I was able to get some food stands to come. They use their food bucks, and we created this economic engine because we showed up with the food. And one thing I also like to do is talk to these bodegas and have them have kind of a fresh food stand. Like, it doesn't have to be something crazy, but let's get some fruits and stuff that are not going to spoil, so that we're not just giving our kids honey buns. So that, and again, because I'm a type 1 diabetic, my nutrition is the only way I live. And I'm not always great with it. Love me some cookies now and again, but there is the reality that we have to start producing our own food and getting our own food out.
I really appreciate it. I love my community who reminds me of things that I'm supposed to talk about. So, and the people who are asking these questions, because we actually have our own small community think tank where we're asking the questions that basically we already do. So, we are in community, literally, with families who do some of the food distribution, who is a food pantry, but it's not a church. It's a
Right.
local, local people who literally, this is the only time I'm going to say this, are the boots on the ground. No pun intended, but literally are the boots on the ground for that. And we, again, community family, have backyard gardens, but is there support from our local officials to not just support it in terms of, hey, great idea, but can there be some funding to either have someone teach more how to do it, or how people who can, listen, grow a garden on their fire escape? I'm sorry for breaking the law, not trying to, but if you need to do it, you need to do it.
Right.
So I'm very, very thankful that you have spent the time here on my digital couch. I really appreciate you, and for showing us that you are listening to the people, you're talking to the people, and you're concerned with the needs of the people.
The people. Stoney, listen, I can't come back to the neighborhood if I do anything wrong to anybody. So we gotta do it right the first time.
Let's do it right the first time. I'll let you have the last word. We talked about all of our like tough topics. I got some comments and questions from the community, and I really appreciate my extended family, my Sankofa family. And so if there's any last word besides to cast their vote for the person that they think will do the job, what say you, Brother Khari?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This is community to me as well, and even though we're on the opposite sides of screens, this is what I think people need to be one with folks, to hear each other. So I'm just really appreciative for you doing this for me. We met doing Martin Luther King weekend at Alliance Tabernacle, my home church, and so you extended this offer, and I'm glad I was able to do it. I love people, and I think a lot of people love people, and it's really my number one thing for folks is whenever you see someone, just say hello, even if it's a stranger. It's something that I find so much joy in, especially when people look at you like you're crazy. I'm like, hey, how are you? How's your day? You're looking at me like I'm crazy, but it's something that I think that we don't really realize we need to hear. So I'm just grateful. I will say this though, on the voting front, they're concerned that we're only going to have 21% of the voting our voting population come out, which will probably be the lowest in the last 7 years. I really encourage folks to get out and vote. And I'm not saying you have to vote for me. I want you to vote for me, but the reality is we have to get out and show our numbers, specifically for communities of color.
That's what needs to happen. So, folks, please make your best choice. My affiliation is to stay right in the middle. So I will talk to whoever wants to talk and let the community that they intend to serve hear what they have to say and what they've come to do. And that's what I'm here to do today. So I do appreciate you. Those of you who stay tuned and keep your notifications on, thank you for those who are on Facebook and on YouTube. We will actually be back next week to discuss ranked choice voting, because that is a whole other conversation in these elections these days. So I'm looking forward to having that conversation. And Brother Khari Edwards, we will see you at the polls.
Thank you for having me. Have a great rest of your week.
We'll see you at the polls. All right. So peace and blessings. So to those who are still watching, once again, this is a Learn to Grow You moment where we plant seeds to help you grow. My name is Doriel Larrier, and I'm the host of this show, the Doriel Larrier Show, where inspirational people come to inform, instruct, and influence people to live their lives just a little bit better than they have the day before. So I look forward to seeing you on our next show. Brother Khari Edwards, we'll see you in a moment, okay?
Thank you.
People, please stay tuned. Please set your notifications and click that notifications bell so that whenever we go live, which is usually on Monday evenings, you'll hear us talk either about politicians and the people. We're going to discuss wellness. We'll be talking about Ministers on a Mission, or a new classes in session, which focuses on teaching, thinking, and learning outside of the box. I wish you all well, and I'll see you next week.